Unit 27 Study Skills, Lesson 2, Reading Graphs and Diagrams. Okay, I'll have to admit today's lesson is actually a pretty short one. So let's start today by talking about diagrams and other parts in this world. And now let's get started. First of all, there are a lot of diagrams in the world that you can use to actually compare a lot of other things too. Like you can usually read tables up to down, left to right, so that you can compare some things. Like take this diagram for example. This diagram shows the populations of 4 major cities in the United States from 1850 to 1996. And those 4 cities are New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Houston. In 1850 New York, if you look down the 1850 column, then you can actually figure out and compare against all the numbers and of the population between those 4 cities. But if you look horizontally from one city to another, you can actually compare the population number of that city over the years instead between the same cities in the same year. Okay, what about pie charts? Well, look here. You might see this pie chart, and pie chart actually, as it implies, it's a chart that looks like a pie. Pie charts are basically just shows fractions of a whole usually. And like, let's say, since this pie chart is a world population pie chart, it's obvious that North America is represented by an 8% slice of the whole pie chart, and the same as its proportion to the whole world population. And also, Asia is actually 60% has the world whole population, and 60% of the world's total population, which is like a great thing to actually do for like Asia, my continent, I guess. Oh. Now, what about line graphs? Well, the line's highest point actually indicates that the immigration in 1990 is at the peak and its highest in any of those years. And also, the line in 1981 intersects with at 597, and since this data is given in thousands, this means that about 597,000 immigrants arrived in 1981. Now, what about tree diagrams? Well, tree diagrams are like a family tree. You might know what I'm talking about. But it's like the reverse. Instead of 2 people combined to 1 person or a few other people, it's like a mother giving offspring to just a few children, and those each creating offspring of others, like single-parent people. Literature is the basics and main idea. Also, it's also the types of literature. If you go branch down, you might see its little subcategory: drama, nonfiction, fiction, and poetry. Now, nonfiction is one of the main ideas, so it branches off literature. And nonfiction itself can branch off into separate things, like essay, biography, sciences, and history. And the history is also a branch of literature, but it also can be split up into other things too, like North American history, South American history. I wonder why I didn't put those together. European history, African history, and Asian and Australian history. And map scales actually represent a lot of things on the map. Like 1 inch on the map actually equals 250 miles. The top line of the scale actually indicates the miles. The bottom line indicates kilometers. And that's really important. Like on the book itself, if you measure this with a ruler and it matches 1 inch, then that means that 1 inch would be equal to 125 miles on the map. However, if you measure the bottom part, like something amount of units distance. Okay, so basically, this highlighted distance is basically equivalent to 125 kilometers. They basically shortened it so that it's like a little key. You're trying to put in the dimensions. And this is a timeline. Timeline and the title actually indicates the subject and time period that occurs. And each time period here is 1 year and what happened during that 1 year. Sometimes it's blank and sometimes it's empty too. And the spaces between the 2 events actually reflects the time that passed between them. So like in 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, which is the first artificial satellite. The first that the only non-artificial natural satellite on Earth is the moon. In 1958, the United States launches its first satellite, Explorer 1, and then in 1959, Luna 2 becomes the first space probe to reach the moon. Nothing happens in 1960, but something happens in 1961. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin actually becomes the first human in space. And in 1962, Valentina Tereshkova becomes the first woman to fly in space. And that's it. That's all of the graphs. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Shnan out. Peace. Next up, taking tests.